she's in the hospital and not doing well. Yeah, and may she have a refuah shlema. And our Torah study will be in her merit, B'ezrat Hashem. Okay, what we're going to talk about, since we only have a few days left, we don't have a class on Wednesday because we're supposed to be cleaning on Wednesday. But we do have today, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then hopefully Thursday we don't have a class ever in Hilchot Kashrut. So really we have these 3 classes. So what I'd like to do is to talk with you a little bit about shopping. shopping for kosher food, and really the question becomes supervision. This is the question we've all been waiting for, because most of us are not yet cooking in our own kitchen. We're definitely not shechting. And many of us don't even grow things in our garden and take off trumot and ma'asrot ourselves. We go and we buy our food from the supermarket, and we all know that there's something called Kashrut certification, and that's accomplished by rabbis who take it upon themselves to supervise the kashrut of certain products that are brought to the market. And the question is, how does that work? And it becomes doubly important before Pesach, because before Pesach, usually there's extra special certifications, extra special supervisions which are done to make sure that not only is it kosher, but kosher for Pesach. And as a matter of fact, one of the most common kashrut symbols or signs that you will find is, I don't think I'm shocking anybody, sometimes you'll find a product which has not one kashrut supervision, but 2 and 3, or even 4 or 5. You'll see a bottle of wine, and on the back it'll have 5 different stamps that say that it's kosher. It's either kosher or it's not. How can there be 5 different? Why are there 5 different kosher stamps? So we'll talk about it a little bit. Right. One of the most common ones is you might see badatz, for example. Badatz stands for the words Beit Din Tzedek. Sorry.
That's a good one or not a good one?
It's a very good one. It's a very good one. Of course, everyone has. There's many different badatz. Is that the plural? Badatz is badatzes, or badatzim in Hebrew. Badatzim. There are many different badatzim.
What about badatz Beit Yosef?
There are many different badatzim. Each one have their pluses and their minuses. Each one have their standards, and we'll talk a little bit about them. But in general, the ones that call themselves a badatz usually are more strict than the standard Rabbanut kashrut supervision of the municipality or the city or whatever. So many badatz seem, even though it is badatz, and they'll say, yeah, this, so you know, oh, we're 1 step above. Many of them say, kosher, according to the badatz, rak liyamot hashana, only for year-round, not for Pesach. Don't make a mistake that just because you see there's a badatz on it, it means it's kosher for Pesach. Kosher for Pesach is a whole nother ball game. It's a whole nother question. If you want to know what's kosher for Pesach, you're going to look for another symbol, another certification. Also, the company that wants the certification is going to have to pay extra. Don't think because you paid us extra to get the badatz for the year-round kosher, we're not giving you Pesach for free. They're going to have to pay extra to get the certification of badatz for Pesach, because that's, a much more stringent, and it's a whole other, level of stringency that you have to take upon yourself. We're not going to guarantee anything for Pesach unless, it's specially designed supervision for Pesach. Because chametz, all year round is quite normal. We talked about this in the other class. We talked about the kashrut for Pesach, that chametz is something which is very strange. This is a very strange prohibition. because the rest of the year it's not prohibited. And so, of course, what are the chances that you're going to find a piece of pork in your kitchen? What are the chances that you're going to find some shellfish or some non-kosher meat? Next to none. But chametz, we eat it all year round, and so there's chametz everywhere, and the chametz, your kitchens are filled with chametz, and so it's that's why we have to be very, very careful about chametz, because we're so used to eating it the rest of the year. Same thing by supervision. It's very hard to supervise that there's no chametz anywhere around the product, even if the product doesn't have any chametz in it. The factory has chametz in it. The workers are eating chametz, and then they're coming to work, work in the factory. It's a whole different ballgame. The stringencies you have to, the supervision you need in order to certify something as kosher for Pesach. So many kashrut supervisions, even though they're very good, and they say, badatz, we're very strict about X, Y, and Z. Many of them will say, kasher. Badatz, lo lepesach, lo kasher lepesach. It doesn't mean it's not kosher for Pesach. Maybe it is, but we're not taking that upon ourselves. This organization is saying, we're not guaranteeing it. We're going to be extra special careful, and we're going to have a special label only for Pesach. Yeah.
I need to ask a very stupid question. If one is in a situation of pikuach nefesh, and he's given the option between two foods, and it's on Pesach, okay? He's given the option of two foods. One is kosher, but it's chametz, and the other is not kosher. So you have should you go with?
So what's the question again? You have two foods.
You're on
One
the
is
island by yourself. You find a bagel and a bacon. And it's also Pesach.
On Pesach.
Which one do you eat?
Good question. Okay, what's the answer? What did you? I heard answers here. Somebody said an answer. What do you say?
You have to take the one but you have to take the bacon because the reason why is that the punishment for eating chametz is more strict than eating non-kosher. So therefore, you take the kosher food since that is less of a punishment.
I disagree.
Interesting.
Okay,
what do you say?
Because a mitzvah which occurs on a regular basis precedes one that comes on a...
Well, doesn't really matter.
I understand the principle you're trying to use, but usually we talk about when you have a priority of positive things to do. Which one do you do first? Or which one takes priority? So we say the one that's more common, tadir, v'sheno tadir kodem, that's when it comes to positive things. When it comes to negative, like prohibitions, we don't really apply that idea. But it's, if something's prohibited, it's prohibited. You can't have it before or after, first or second. You can't have it no matter what. It's just a question of choosing one or the other, right? You're not going to eat both, hopefully. If you're on a desert island, you have to eat both, so then there's no question. Then you might have to have a good question, which prohibition do first. But it doesn't really matter.
Because often you have only two pieces of food with you.
Right,
right.
You're able to survive with one. It was the question, which one?
Right. You have a bagel. You should have the stam. I'm saying you should have the stam treifel on Pesach, and that'll give you strength to get through Pesach, and after Pesach you'll have the bagel.
It's an interesting question. Yeah. What did you want to say?
If you're at that point of pikuach nefesh, you wouldn't even be choosing. For example, if you have to go to the hospital, do I choose to get an apple or to try myself? Doesn't matter. You go to the hospital, and that's it. There's no point of choosing.
You're absolutely right. It's almost clearly a theoretical question.
Yeah.
Practically, but you could imagine such a situation where it's not going to cause any delay, and the decision is in front of you: do I eat the pork or do I eat the chametz on Pesach? I tend to think that Ezra's in the right direction. That the chametz on Pesach is considered to be an isur karet. It's punishable by excision, which is considered to be the highest level of punishment that the Torah has. That your soul is cut off, or your children are cut off, or your life is cut off, and that's even considered to be a more strict punishment than even the death penalty. So, eating non-kosher, it's not a good idea. It's definitely prohibited, but I don't think it's a karet. Eating pork is not a karet. It's an isur lav. It's a lo taseh, one of the standard prohibitions in the Torah. Of course, it's perhaps a little bit more severe than other prohibitions because you're ingesting it in your body. We spoke about it. There's a drasha of Chazal which say that I think it was this week's parsha.
It
doesn't have the. And what does it say? Shemini. Yeah.
Well, doesn't it use the word abomination for eating pork?
It doesn't. It doesn't.
In English, abomination, but I don't know what it.
Does it?
I think it does. I think it for eating pork and also homosexuality, it uses the word abomination.
I think for homosexual, but I don't think for pork. Yeah, that's what he's referring to, but I don't think it says that by pork. Do you have a pasuk? Did you look it up, or did you?
At the end of the chapter 11, from the last parasha.
Yeah, what does it say?
I think there's.
Does it say it says abomination?
I think.
Yeah, I read the abomination. And also Yeshayahu was talking about that.
Devarim,
Vayikra.
Don't make me sorry for.
Vayikra 7:21.
No.
But that's about
No.
Kohanim, right?
Vayikra 7. I'm looking 7:21.
11 and last.
That's for eating prohibited korbanot. That 7:11 is not the right place. But in chapter 11 at the end, I'm looking. 1 second. It says you should be holy and not eat any of the forbidden foods, but it doesn't say karet. It doesn't. It says do not be defiled by them, and that's what I was starting to say. Is that there is a special severity.
In Devarim 14, I think it mentions in English abomination.
Devarim 14. Yeah. What?
Chapter 14.
Yeah. What pasuk? Right. The forbidden foods are mentioned. Forbidden animals are mentioned in last week's parsha, in Parshat Shmini and Vayikra, and then again in Parshat Re'eh, and that's what you're referring to. Again, it says don't eat them. Well, where does it say abomination? I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, it mentions the word abominable in verse 3.
Verse 3. I don't see it in 3. Yes, but about all the forbidden animals, right. Do not eat any abomination, right. Interesting. So, one second, let me finish. I still want to go back to what I wanted to say. Reuven jumped in with this idea of abomination, which is a measure. We try to keep all the mitzvot, right? And all the prohibitions are we'd give everything we have in the world to not have to transgress a prohibition. Whether it's called an abomination or not. But there is this idea that there's some prohibitions we try to understand which ones are the more severe ones based on the punishment. So we said based on the punishment, it seems to be that there's a karet for chametz where there's no karet by other forbidden foods. Reuven is suggesting there's another way that we can perhaps measure different types of sins against each other, and that is whether or not the Torah calls them an abomination. And he found the pasuk, which doesn't appear in our parsha, but it does appear in the repetition of the forbidden foods, forbidden animals in Dvarim, as he said in chapter 14, verse 3. It says, while introducing, all the kosher animals and non-kosher animals, it says, do not eat any abominable things. So assumption is that's what it's referring to, those non-kosher animals. So it's called an abomination. That would be giving a nod to, don't have the forbidden animal, the pork. I was going to suggest a third consideration to how to decide, what a horrible decision, decide between prohibited things. But again, it's a theoretical question, trying to analyze the mitzvot from the Torah. By forbidden foods in last week's parsha, it doesn't say abomination, but it does say, don't eat these things, you should be a holy people. V'nitmeitem bam. Do not make yourself tamei through eating them. Now, okay, clearly the context is, say for Vayikra, you're not allowed to go to the Beit HaMikdash when you're tamei. So don't become tamei, because if you become tamei, ritually impure, and you go to the temple, that's very severe. But if you become ritually impure and you're not going to the temple, it's no big deal. We're all impure. Nowadays we don't have the red heifer. Hopefully you listen to the Torah reading about the paraduma, and so we're pretty much all assumed to be tamei on some level. It's no real prohibition to be tamei, but the Torah says v'nitmeitem bam as a bad thing. You don't want to become tamei, even if you're not going to go to the temple, eating the prohibited foods. What did we say about nida? That there's two sides to the coin, right? A menstruating woman. That one is that you're not allowed to have relations with her, and one is that when she's menstruating and things that she touches are ritually impure. They're tameh. She's not allowed to go to the Beit HaMikdash. We said that part doesn't matter anymore because we don't have a Beit HaMikdash anyways yet. And but the part about being prohibited to her husband, that's applicable. Now we're saying, well, wait. If the Torah says that you're going to become tameh by eating, that's something bad. It sounds like something bad. Really, what makes it bad is the drasha. There is a rabbinic interpretation of the pasuk. Many times they do interpretations based on sort of a misreading or a variant reading. Same letters can be read differently. Not v'nitzmeitem bam, and you shall become impure by eating these forbidden foods, but v'nitamtem bam. Anybody speak Hebrew and, well, on the streets, someone says to you, "Ata metumtam." What does that mean?
An idiot.
An idiot. That's right, stupid. That's right. So v'nitmeitem bam can be read as v'nitamtem bam. That if you eat forbidden foods, it will clog your mind. It will somehow have an effect on you by making you spiritually, it comes from the word closed up. It spiritually it creates spiritual blockage in your soul. You'll be stunted, that's right. Yes. Spiritually stupid, right. So that, it doesn't say that about every other prohibition. Don't, violate the Shabbat. It doesn't say you'll become stupid if you violate the Shabbat. It doesn't say don't wear shatnez, because if you wear shatnez, you'll become closed up or spiritually stunted. So there's something special about these prohibitions of eating, in particular, because you're ingesting something the Torah prohibited, that there's actually a higher severity to it, or a more severe repercussion of violating that prohibition as opposed to any other prohibition. So like I said, we try to stay away from every prohibition, but what we're trying to do is see if from the words of the Torah or our sages, we can make some kind of gradations when you have to make this kind of triage decision of which one is going to come first, or which is worse. So if you're on the desert island, going back to Moshe's stupid question, it's not a stupid question. It helps us to theoretically analyze the different prohibitions of chametz versus the prohibition of eating the forbidden foods. By the way, we also, before I get to the answer, we also talked, even within the forbidden foods, we said that there's two types. What were the two types that we talked about? Right now we talked about animals which are not kosher.
Well, you've got animals which are treif, and you've got animals which have been shechted or prepared in a non-kosher way.
Right, and then what else is there? What else is there?
Defiled animals.
Okay. What, say again? So, good. So we mentioned, but there's one more that you haven't mentioned yet, and we said that its laws are a little bit different. The other prohibition. So you guys are mentioning nevela and treifa. Nevela and treifa is there we go. Nevela and treifa is even if you have a kosher animal. So first there's non-kosher animals. Then there's kosher animals, but they were not shechted properly. They were not slaughtered according to the rules. Or there's something that's blemished about the unhealthy. Terefa, it's a samum. So it's nevela and treifa. But then there's, even if it's a kosher animal, but you mix it with milk, basar b'chalav. If you cook it with milk, or you eat it with milk, or you're not allowed to have benefit from basar b'chalav. So that's within the kosher laws. There's also a gradation of which ones are worse. We said perhaps basar b'chalav is worse because you're not even allowed to have any benefit from it. Whereas pig skin you can throw around the football we talked about, right? Because you're allowed to have benefit from it. This is a little bit strange, even though it's become the icon of non-kosher food. Basar b'chalav seems to be worse. Meat and milk seems to be worse. So, and all these non-kosher foods, though, the assumption is, what we read in last week's parsha was that don't eat any of these non-kosher foods, because v'nitmeitem bam, you will become ritually impure through them. Can be read, sages in their divine wisdom, they it's not like I made up this drasha, they made up the drasha, which says that there's some kind of a spiritual ramification to eating them. So they're even more severe. Vinitamtem bam, because vinitmetem could be read vinitamtem, that you will become spiritually blocked up if you eat these foods. So that's another nod to the don't eat the pork. Maybe it's better to eat the bagel on Pesach, even though this is a karet, and this on the other hand, this one is it might be you're ingesting something which is inherently bad for your soul. So this is the debate we're having. Is something you want to say something?
I heard a Rob once tell me that the eating non-kosher, that phrase, what's the phrase again? It's
Treif?
No, that causes you to become stupid.
Metumtam, yeah, metamtem, yeah.
That the modern equivalent of that, or the modern phrasing of that, is mental health problems.
That's much more polite, 100%. If you go to somebody and say you're metumtam, you sound like a 5-year-old, and that's not PC. You don't call somebody metumtam. Somebody has mental health problem, you say bayot briot hanefesh, bayot nafshiot. You have it's called mental health. So that's the Hebrew. Hebrew for mental health is nowadays briut hanefesh, mental health. Briut hanefesh. Nefesh is used. Nefesh is usually called spirit or something. So it's like a briut hanefesh is briut haguf and briut hanefesh. You don't say this to people, he's metumtam. No, that's not modern Hebrew usage. It's used for curses, for like children's, saying he's an idiot. You don't go. They used to call people with mental health problems idiots, right? That was the legal term for people that were retarded or insane or with dementia. They used to say they were idiots. That was a legal term. Nowadays, like stupid. No, stupid was not a legal term. Idiot was a legal term. But nowadays, if you say that somebody, he's an idiot, you sound like a 5-year-old, and you're not using the proper terminology. Same thing with metumtam. It's not used as for mental health anymore. It's just used for 5-year-olds being mean to each other. Okay. All right. Yeah. Yossi.
I want to go to one of those disaster scenarios. If you do have to eat something unkosher, how long do you have to wait until you decided that okay, I think I'm halakhically clear of being prohibited from eating non-kosher? Like the human body can last, so to say, up to a month without food. So with that in mind, also, are you chayav to eat it to save your life? And if you are, in all those cases, do you say bracha?
Very good. What did you say, Ezra?
You don't say bracha on non-kosher food.
Good. So it should be clear. The basis of this discussion is that, of course, you have to eat the non-kosher food if your life depends on it. Pikuach nefesh pushes off all of the Torah, even the ones we've been discussing. Both chametz on Pesach, pushed off by if there's a danger to anybody's life, and except for three, except for the big three, right? The capital. Idolatry, adultery, and murder. Right. So none of these forbidden eating, prohibited foods are of those three cardinal sins. They're called. So definitely you eat them if your life depends on it. Do you say you're chayav to? You must do what you can to save your life, just like you must do what you can to save somebody else's life. Primarily, you have to do what you can to save your life.
After the consideration of humanly limits, how long should you wait to...
So then that question about, if we're saying that it has an effect on you, do you pattern that after the digestive system? No. This is a spiritual principle. It's a spiritual principle that if you ate something non-kosher, it affects your soul. It doesn't affect your body. So I don't think we pattern after, say, you have to wait 3 hours for digestion, 6 hours, 24 hours till the blood circulation. No. You're barking up the wrong tree here. This is a spiritual principle. And as soon as you do tshuva, if you did it wrongly, then you can consider yourself clean. You say the vidui, and you take upon yourself, I'm never going to do this again. and you say you're sorry to Hashem, and then you're clean. This is the power of tshuva. It's amazing. I don't think we have any time limit on how long after you. Like some people would say, well, I couldn't help myself, and I bought a cheeseburger and I ate half of it, but now I'm feeling bad. But I have a time, maybe I'll just finish the sandwich and then I'll do tshuva. No. Don't eat anymore. Right away, stop what you're doing and take it upon yourself to never succumb to your desires again. And then, that's the best you can do. But you don't have to wait any time period after having your cheeseburger. Now, making a bracha on non-kosher food is problematic. When somebody is doing it permissibly, when you're actually, you must eat for pikuach nefesh. So then, this is where we get into the difference between the different types of prohibitions of eating. For example, somebody who's eating on Yom Kippur because of health matters, he does say a bracha on the food. But if he's eating non-kosher food, like Ezra said, like if you're eating pork, even though it's for health considerations, I don't think you say a bracha. In other words, we have two different types of food-related prohibitions. One is time-bound, and that a good example is that Yom Kippur, and the other one is perhaps chametz on Pesach. So perhaps chametz on Pesach, if you had to eat chametz on Pesach, perhaps you would say a bracha. Because there's nothing inherently wrong with the food. It's only time for, during those 7 days that it's prohibited. But it's not inherently considered to be like pork or like any of the other prohibited animals or insects that you're not allowed to eat. Those you would not say a bracha on no matter what, even if you're eating them for pikuach nefesh. So it's very interesting. This matter, chametz on Pesach, is it considered to be like eating on Yom Kippur? It's a time-bound prohibited eating. That can be compared that way. Or you could say, no, wait, for those 7 days, perhaps eating chametz is like eating pork. Perhaps the chametz, it's a particular food. It's not like eating on Yom Kippur where eating anything is prohibited. It's clearly the amount of time which you're just not allowed to eat during that time. So it's not really a prohibited food. Chametz, maybe it becomes like pork for those 7 days. And then, maybe you wouldn't make a bracha on it, even if you had to eat it for pikuach nefesh. It's a fascinating topic. And believe it or not, this entire discussion has ramifications. Not for desert island questions, not for questions of pikuach nefesh, but even for the question which we discussed last week of how can you kasher your oven on Pesach? I'll take your question in a minute, Moshe, but let me just explain the thought. Can you kasher your oven on Pesach, for Pesach, from the chametz? Why does that make any difference? Well, the question is defined in halacha as isura bala or hetera bala. When we say that the oven, for example, the walls of the oven, a vessel, absorbed the taste of chametz, do we consider that it absorbed prohibited taste, or did it absorb permitted taste? Right? Like every milky vessel, it absorbs milk, but that's permitted taste. It only becomes a problem if you mix it with meat. And there's a certain set of rules for hetera bala, if something absorbed permitted taste, as opposed to if something absorbed non-kosher meat taste. Right? That's isura bala. So when it absorbs chametz, is that considered heter or isur? It goes back to our question, right? Do we compare chametz on Pesach like Yom Kippur? It's just a temporal prohibition, perhaps, on the person not to eat during these 24 hours. But there's not all the food in the world becomes like pork for 24 hours. There's nothing wrong with the food. The food's fine. Just you're not allowed to eat it. On the other hand, and maybe you treat chametz the same way. There's nothing wrong with chametz. It's just for 7 days you're not allowed to eat it. But perhaps chametz for 7 days turns into something which is prohibited, like the pork, because the 7 days is more than 24 hours, and he said maybe it's an essential prohibition, even though it's time bound for only 7 days. It actually becomes like a forbidden food, and that If it does, that might be the difference whether or not you can kasher your oven. Because if you consider that chametz is isura bala, we don't. It's harder to be lenient about doing libun kal instead of libun chamor, which is the way most ovens are kashered, with libun kal. And so this entire discussion about how to understand the prohibition of chametz, like forbidden foods or like, just something that's of a lesser prohibition, has ramifications till today. Moshe.
So this is a little bit
Tangential.
But if the example of a very sickly person or a woman who's nursing who has to eat on Yom Kippur, if they eat bread, are there any special additions to Birkat Hamazon?
Yes.
You have to say.
Yes. Very simple answer. Yes. There, of course, it's a machloka, but the standard is yes. You say Yalav Yava on Yom Kippur. Yeah. Yes, fascinating. We say Yalav Yava in our prayers. Why not say it in the benching? All right. In the davening, we say on Yom Kippur Yalav Yava.
I actually did see a Yom
Actually, we don't on Yom Kippur, but.
I actually did see a picture that did have Yom Kippur Yalav Yava.
Very interesting. That's right. That's the standard. That's why I say, even though it's a machloka.
I also had Yom Kippur Kiddush in it too.
Fascinating. Right. When you have to eat, it's a mitzvah to eat. So, going back to your original question, Moshe, even though that was a tangent on a tangent on a tangent, it's hard to trace ourselves back to the original discussion. Which one is better to eat on Pesach? If you have to choose between eating chametz or eating pork, for example, treif. Not an easy answer. It's not an easy answer. Chametz is karet. And maybe the chametz on Pesach, on the other hand, the forbidden foods, it's going to cause spiritual damage. V'nitamtem ba. But then on the third hand, maybe the chametz on Pesach gets the status of damaging foods as well. And so I'm leaning towards eating the non-kosher over the chametz on Pesach. But it's good question. Yeah.
You need to internalize the idea that this is pikuach nefesh.
100%.
So you should eat the pork to say to yourself, I'm eating this because it's pikuach nefesh. Versus if you're eating the chametz, it could be interpreted as one being lenient on Pesach. But eating the pork is like it's not. This is pikuach nefesh.
Right. Well, I think I hear you. But I think we really should be training ourselves to recognize that eating chametz on Pesach is really against Judaism. It's a really bad idea, even as much as eating pork all year round. Chametz on Pesach is a very, very high level prohibition, punishable by excision. So don't try this at home, folks. We should never be pushed to situations of pikuach nefesh. But this discussion helps us, theoretical discussion, helps us analyze the difference between the different prohibitions of forbidden foods. And it was Parshat HaShavua, so right on topic. And Bezrat Hashem will continue laws of Kashrut tomorrow. We'll have to stop here for today.
Let's see, should we really look for?